We get a little skewed, we're in a little, I don't know, how do we put it, insulated here in California from the way the people that elected President Trump feel. And so maybe the Paris Accords on climate change are a good example, which he said he's going to pull out, although maybe he wants to renegotiate, I'm not sure. But is this about, in healthcare, about appealing to his base, that these are the people who got me elected, and regardless, I'm going to stay with them no matter what?
Yeah. The president knows that he needs his base if he has any hope of getting reelected. He has to retain. So if you look at the president's approval ratings, the president generally is somewhere in the low 40s, high 30s, depending on the poll. Most of that is an artifact of really strong support amongst base partisans, so he probably is at mid to high 80s, if not higher, amongst his base partisans. He's struggling a little bit with independents, and forget about it with Democrats. The president recognizes that he needs to be responsive there. Now, I do think it's a function of two things. One is the need to be responsive to his base, particularly the one area where I think the administration has been very successful with respect to the base, and this is unequivocally understood by Republicans, is on judicial nominations. So getting Neil Gorsuch across the finish line as an Associate Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court is considered huge by, if you ask most conservatives, what do you think the biggest accomplishment of President Trump's been, they will almost to every number of them will say Gorsuch. They are pursuing relatively conservative nominations to the courts of appeal. So, that will be very enticing to Republicans as well. And then some of these other things, whether it's on Obamacare or tax reform or pulling out of Paris, if that ends up happening, I think are definitely calibrated to that base. The question becomes, at what point does he figure out that he needs to pick up more than just that base partisan group, and what are the ways in which he reaches out, which is why infrastructure could be appealing, which is why a compromise on immigration could be appealing, which is why tax reform could be appealing. So we'll have to see when that shift happens. Arguably, it'll happen when he figures out he needs it to happen, which is after the 2018 election.
Well, do we see a Democrat agenda other than anything but Trump? I mean, do we see, exactly what you're talking about, a bipartisan opportunity for immigration, a bipartisan opportunity for infrastructure? Do we see that happening? Or is that not, is it better to just have an enemy?
I think that in the short run, Democrats have arrived at the conclusion that they are better off in opposition to Trump and to be this so-called resistance. That is a very, very dicey proposition for the long-run health of the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party really has no affirmative agenda right now. Arguably, they didn't have one in 2016. It's part of the reason Hillary Clinton lost. They didn't have an agenda. They had the semblance of a few ideas they really liked. So they would talk over and over again about paid leave, and they would talk over and over again about certain issues in the social space. But that's not an agenda. And I think you see what the outcome of that was. They lost the presidential election and they lost the congressional election. They're on target to continue to lose many governor seats across the country in 2018 as well. So in the short run, it may get them the House in 2018. It very well might. But it is not a recipe to either elect state executives or, frankly, to elect a president. They need to be able to come up with some agenda that speaks not to California and New York, but to the middle-class American who has been struggling under what, at least on the coast, appears to be an economic recovery, but in many parts of the country has not been.